Hello, I'd like to introduce you to the new Z4, Z8 samplers from Akai.
What's up? You got your boy Dyreck, aka Native Shades, reminding you to like and subscribe, because today we're gonna be talking about the Akai Z series samplers. What had happened was, remember the mid-70s? It was an interesting time. This is a time when a family, yes, a family, would get together on a Saturday night, everybody in the living room. Sometimes they would invite other family members over, or even friends, or even neighbors. The next door neighbor in apartment 4B, yeah, you tell them, hey, Greg, if you want to come by, you could come by. We're gonna have a little get together. Everybody would be in the living room, the kids running around, and the adults all standing up. Waiting for what, you might ask? Waiting for the music. All of a sudden, the father or the older brother would reel in the audio rack mounts. Remember the rack mounts? Oh man, some of y'all, I don't know if y'all old enough to remember this, but it would come in a shelf, like furniture. The shelf, you know, like that antique chair your grandma gave y'all for the housewarming? This was the same wood used on that chair was made to create these rack mounts. And in the rack mounts, you would have the receiver. That's where, you could listen to the radio and all the other audio equipment gets connected to, the speakers get connected to it. Then you would have the record player with all the classic records of the day. You would have Al Green, loving you whether times are good or bad, happy or sad. You would have Marvin Gaye, let's get it on. Let's get it on. Or even KC and the Sunshine Band. Babe, I love you so that I want you to know. Please don't go. You would have all these classic sounds of the time bumping in the living room. Everybody dancing and grooving. Sometimes you even had an 8-track in there connected to the receiver. And if you was really the bee's knees, if you was really boss about your equipment, you would have, yes, that's right, the immaculate equalizer. Remember that? Those guys that were really about their audio equipment, they would have a separate equalizer. They would be EQing their sounds. That's when they were really about that music. Well, you fast forward to the mid-80s, and all of a sudden, a lot of the hardware companies started coming out with rack audio gear. You had the Korg SDD 2000 digital delay sampler that came out in 1985, responsible for such hits as The Bridge, The Bridge, Queensbridge, The Bridge. You would have the Akai S612 sampler that came out in 1985. That was actually 12-bit, one of the best sounding samplers Akai ever made. You had the Ensoniq ESQ, the digital analog synthesizer, one of the most revolutionary pieces of equipment Ensoniq ever came out with. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, rack mount audio gear was a common thing back then. So you fast forward all the way to 2002, and things kind of changed. All of a sudden, DAWs became the way to go. Whether it was Reason, Pro Tools, Fruity Loops, everybody was using this thing called a DAW. It became commonplace just because of how fast it was for you to do what you needed to do. And because of that, the legendary rack mounts kind of fell to the side. People weren't really using them like that. But Akai had one last hurrah. Even though they were going through struggles with the company, they said, listen, we're gonna put out one more rack sampler. We're gonna put out the greatest rack sampler ever made. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the Akai Z8 and Z4 rack mount samplers. The Japanese engineers was not playing with this one. This was the world's first, I repeat, the world's first 24-bit, 96 kilohertz dedicated hardware-based samplers. Akai even had to create their own Z96 LSI processor exclusively for some of the features on this joint. You know, the Japanese engineers was real strict with this one. They were really strict with this one. It was so crazy in Japan that producers would send their young proteges into the stores and say, listen, get me that Z-series sampler. The guy would go to the store with the head producer on the phone, and he'll go to the salesman like, yeah, how you doing? Yeah, we need a Akai Z-series sampler. And the salesman would be like, oh, okay, we don't have any right now. So you want Akai, right? And the protege would say on the phone to the boss, that he asked, Akai, right? Is that what we want? And the boss would be like, tell him he is incompetent. Yes, Akai. And the protege would be like, what? The boss would say, tell him. He'd be like, yes, you are incompetent. I want Akai. The salesman would be like, come again? Yeah, I think we got some Akais in the back. I'm gonna go check. The protege will tell the boss, yeah, he said they might have some in the back. He's going to go check. The boss would be like, tell him if I was not a religious man, I would burn down this store right now. The protege would say, what? The boss would be like, tell him. He'd be like, yes, if I was not a religious man, I would burn down this store right now. And the salesman would look at the guy weird, to a point the other sales guys would come around and look at him like, hey, who is this guy? And you know, the salesman would be like, listen, man, we got some Roland samplers if you want. And protege will go to the boss like, they said they have Roland samplers. The boss would be like, no, tell him to go F himself and we don't want it. The protege would be like, listen, the boss will say, tell him that. He'll be like, go F yourself, we don't want it, and then run out of the store. This is how serious the Z-Series samplers were in Japan. The Z-Series gave you 4 Q-Link real-time controllers, 8 Q-Links with the Z8, and the Z8 gave you a detachable faceplate, so you didn't have to point and poke at your sampler as if you were trying to program your VCR or something. You can just lay it on your desk and just start going through the menus and tweaking that way. You had a 60 gig hard drive with all types of sounds. You had 256 megabytes of RAM, expandable to a whopping 512 megabytes of RAM. Unbelievable. You had 64 voice polyphony. You had a USB so that you can copy your samples to and from your computer. The USB supported floppy drives, CDR drives, keyboards, all kind of hard drives. And you can also connect it to your PC or your Mac or whatever computer you were using, so you could use the new revolutionary software from Akai, Akai Z, where basically you can control all the functions of the Z samplers on your computer screen using the mouse. It was like you was on your DAW using software. This was incredible. You had a MIDI learn feature. You know, most machines did not have MIDI learn there, where you can connect something and just have it learn it automatically just by a push of a button. You had that in the Z-Series samplers. You had MIDI in, MIDI out, MIDI through, a world clock, a SCSI interface, a SPDIF interface. They threw everything at these samplers, plus the kitchen sink. And when it hit the States, the results was not so great. It wasn't so great. I mean, the Z-Series samplers were pretty much the exact samplers you got in the MPC 4000. And the MPC 4000 sold very well. But as far as the Z series rack mounts, not a lot of folks really purchased them. Some people brought them, but once again, the rack mounts were kind of going out of style. People didn't really want to start poking and programming as if they were programming their VCR. That was not what folks wanted. Even though the Z8 gave you the removable faceplate so that you can work it flat on your desk, people still just didn't want to deal with the big heavy rack mounts. And then give it a couple years and VSTs became the new waves. Contact was giving you Abbey Road and all types of great VST sounding programs. It might not have sounded as great as some of these rack modules and samplers and synthesizers, but they were getting there. And it wasn't to a point where the musician really cared too much about it. They were more into using these DAWs with all these neat VSTs. I mean, think about it. There was a time before where you had to drop a couple of grand to get these kind of samplers. But now, you could spend like $20 and get a dope VST. And it can give you all the instrumental sounds you need. The music world pretty much changed. And the Akai Z series samplers, as great and as revolutionary as they were, kind of went unnoticed. And during the mid-2000s, people just did not want to buy rack samplers. You know, picking a rack sampler, they just didn't want to pick it. It's like, you know, you ever got picked last for a team? You know, like when you were a kid and you were playing touch football and they were choosing teams and they would be like, oh, okay, I got Jerry. And the other guy would be like, yeah, I got Peter. And it would be between you and another dude. And they'll be like, I got Ronald. And it'll just be you by yourself. There'll be no other choice but you. But for some reason, the captain of the other team still doesn't want to pick you. He'll be looking over you, looking at guys, just thinking there gotta be someone else. To a point, he sees a girl walking across the street with a shopping bag. And he's like, hey, girl, you want to play touch football? All we need is one more man. And you'd be like, oh man, I must really suck. That's how much folks did not want a big clunky rack sampler in their studio. But even though the samplers themselves were not highly sought, the MPC 4000 was. And these samplers were the thing that made the MPC 4000 great, to the point it's regarded as possibly the greatest MPC of all time. The features in the Z series sampler really put a mark in music production at the time. Countless producers used the Z series sample engine to get their job done. From Madlib to Just Blaze to Lord Finesse to Large Professor, you name it, every big producer had the 4000 at the time, and the Z series sampler is what pushed it. So as far as the price of the Z samplers, the Z4 was $17.99 and the Z8 was $22.99. And to tell you the truth, as far as all you was getting with these samplers, and as far as the technology that was built into these things, that was not a bad price at all. That was a very reasonable price. As time went on and the mid-2000s passed and you got around the 2013s and 14s, people started to appreciate the sound of a lot of rack mount audio gear. Producers started not to care how cluttered their studio looked. In fact, producers started buying the old rack mounts and filling their studio up with all kind of rack equipment. So yeah, that's the legendary Akai Z series samplers. What had happened was... So this is your boy Dyreck, aka Native Shades, reminding you to like and subscribe. And I'm signing off.